So I'm delighted to say very good morning, good luck on Sunday. Welcome to Page Fuller. Page, good morning.
Morning.
And we have been trying to pin you down for a little while, but you've been busy, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's really good. I could not imagine, say 18 months ago, I was sort of tossing up whether or not to go professional. And to say that I am where I am now I can't believe it, really.
And you'd been sort of chipping away, but without people really latching on and noticing for a little while as an amateur. Were you sort of thinking, is it going to happen, isn't it going to happen during that period?
Well, I think I always exceeded my expectations, which is always a nice way to be. I think, 10 years ago when I was sort of coming to my A-levels and everything, it still wasn't really a career option, so I was very much sort of in the mindset of, I'm going to start pointing at 16. I was already riding out at 14, and I've been pony racing since I was 9. And so when I got to 16, it was just a case of going pointing, having fun with my riding, and sort of trying to work out how to fit that alongside a normal job. And once I left school and I got more into it, I sort of started riding a few winners and people started to use me, and as the years went on it sort of got a bit more momentum behind me, and now I'm sat here now, and every year I've kind of exceeded where I thought I would be, which is always a really nice place to be.
So when you were doing the pony racing and the pointing, what normal job was on the horizon? What could it have been?
I have no idea, to be honest, and I think that probably was half the reason why I ended up in racing, because I just enjoyed it, and to get up every day and do something that you love doing. I couldn't ever. I tried a couple of internships just generally around the place when I was still amateur, but I ended up taking so many days off to go racing. I thought, well, it shouldn't really be that way round, and so actually I just thought I've got to take the plunge.
I know pony racing's been very important for a lot of people. How important was it for you?
Oh, I think it must have been very, very important. I never had that many good ponies or anything, and I certainly wasn't in the sort of red-hot areas of pony racing. But I started when I was 9 years old, and I probably had 4 or 5 rides a season. And actually, it very much it gets you racecourse experience. Getting to the races, getting changed, takes sort of half of the nerves away from when you start pointing. Silly things like starts, they are so crucial. Like, you can win or lose a race at the start, and actually, because I had slow ponies, I had to get a good start, and actually, hopefully it really helped me once I started pointing. Is
it a bit like any other endeavour in horse racing, insofar as you have to have the good ponies, and getting them is quite hard to come by?
Yeah, like when I first started, we were all on proper fluffy ponies. I was still finishing.
Sort of Thelwell style.
Yeah, proper. I think there's a photo of me from when my first pony race, and most of them are still in GP saddles, And I had my dad rode in points a little bit, and I had his old exercise saddle that I was racing in, so I probably looked smarter than some of the others. But I think once I got to the bigger stage of ponies, they were all getting to be thoroughbreds or half thoroughbreds, and it was difficult, but again, it taught me a lot, and I definitely, I think, going straight into pointing, I think I won in my first point-to-point race, and would that have happened without my pony racing background? Probably not, so it did count for a lot, and some of the lads now that are coming through, just you can see that it's like invaluable experience for them.
And was it 50-50 boys and girls when you were doing it, or was it mainly men?
Pony racing?
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of girls doing it. Back then, and probably still now. I haven't been pointing in a while, so I can't tell you how it is now. But at that level, I think there was still quite a lot of girls doing it. So it certainly wasn't male dominated as such, quite like the riding in point-to-points and stuff was. You
mentioned your dad was a point-to-point rider. What kind of rider was he?
A very amateur rider. He did have a winner. He didn't touch a horse before he met my mum, and then decided he never touched a horse, and decided that he sort of wanted to learn to ride, and then through that decided that normal riding wasn't fast enough, and he used to race cars. So he thought that actually racing horses sound like... He actually met Di Williams on a trip to America, I think, one time to watch timber racing, and Di said, "Oh, we better find you a racehorse if you're happy to race cars. You'll be fine on a horse." So at the sort of age of nearly 40, I think he rode in his point-to-points and had a winner and had good fun doing that.
My respect for him as just got out of proportion. Like anyone who has never touched a horse and suddenly gets up, but he's obviously an adrenaline junkie if he likes racing cars.
Yeah, and I think I had no chance really. You know, with mum in horses and dad in car racing, I suppose they were always going to choose someone like me.
Was your mum in racing?
I think her family had always had interests, and her grandparents had a stud up in Yorkshire, so she used to go up there in her holidays and go hunting and stuff. But she never rode in point-to-points herself, but always had enthusiasm. You know.
So you're the kind of first generation jockey.
Yeah.
Proper jockey.
Yeah, I think my granddad rode in point-to-points as well, but proper jockey, yeah.
So there was that cusp moment where you had to decide whether you were going to be unpaid, essentially, ride in points, whatever, take those opportunities, or do this properly and make a career out of it. What was the killer moment, do you think? That turned it.
I think it was realising that I really had the support to make it sustainable. When I was riding, well, a lot of it as well is it's quite difficult pointing now to really get going pointing, and I was still in the hope that I would, as an amateur, be able to ride on the big days, and you know, I really wanted to ride in the big festival races, you know, the Kinmuir and the National Hunt Chase, and I still was struggling to pick up those rides, and it was sort of grinding on me a bit, and like I couldn't. You know, I couldn't really get going pointing either, because if I was riding at the weekends under rules, I didn't know till Friday if I was riding, so you miss out on the better rides pointing. So I was sort of picking up more spares and small, you know, rides on slightly lesser horses, and I was riding more under rules. And, you know, actually I think just as the momentum was really getting going, and I had a really good couple of months, April and May 2018, I think I rode 8 winners through those months, and I teamed up with Zoe Davison as well, and you know, she sort of suggested that she'd support me, and I had Jamie, and Jamie's horses were really starting to get rolling, and I had a couple of winners on Monbeg Theatre at Cheltenham and Haydock, and I actually realised that like if I was ever going to give it a go, it was then. I was getting the volume of rides, and I was getting better rides than I had done ever before, and even with having taken 3 months out of my season, I think I rode 14 winners that year. So, like, it was definitely that. It was either then or never, and I just went, actually, you've got to give it a go and see how I get on.
Because you then, just as you were really starting to roll, in the manner of these things, more often than not, you got a nasty injury. Just tell me a bit about that period.
I broke my ankle back in August 2017, I think it was, and or 60, I can't remember which one it was, but it was just as I was really starting to get going, and I hadn't been champion amateur at that point or anything, but like it was a real setback because Jamie was using me, and I was starting to build relationships with other people, and it was just another. I think earlier that year as well, I fractured a vertebrae, and it was just another thing in that sort of like just stopping the ball rolling really, and then I had a really good run of it, and then I broke my collarbone in the Durham National at the sort of December 2018, and that was really frustrating as well because, you know, I'd won on Monbeg Theatre at Cheltenham and Haydock, and obviously, as you say, the ball was rolling, and then Monbeg was going to he won a handicap as well at Wetherby, and he was going to the West Yorkshire Hurdle, and so that was sort of a big stage to be on, and would have been my first chance in a sort of listed graded race, and it's just, you know, it's just those little things that sort of annoying, but actually luckily I wasn't out for too long. I think I was out for 5 weeks. I was back in time for Christmas, and obviously the winter's then a bit slow, and we had a really dry winter, which for Zoe's horses as well, it didn't suit us because we couldn't get them on the grass gallops, and it always makes a difference, and her horse all love heavy ground and that, so you know, it was a struggle to sort of get the ball rolling again, but actually, you know, once the ball started rolling again, it keeps rolling, doesn't it? So
it just kept going, and then and the momentum was with you again. Just in terms of why you turned professional, were the exploits of other women jockeys an inspiration of any sort? The way that Rachel Blackmore and Bryony Frost and others have done so well in the last couple of years?
I think they were. I think obviously that's got to have an effect, probably more on the attitudes of everyone else around me. Like, I definitely turned because it was right for me, rather than, like, I'd say people like Lucy Alexander, more than anyone else, like
who very rarely gets a mention.
Who very rarely gets a mention.
And yeah, I'm glad you did.
And she really turned the tables because she was the first champion conditional, and that is such a big deal. And realised that actually you can just go day in, day out and ride against the lads and it be normal. And as I say, like, I think I turned because it was the right thing for me to do. And I think that it was the right thing for me to do mostly because attitudes outside of my kind of career had changed as well. And it's very much changing. And like, I think it will keep changing. And I think it just needs people to realise that it's not just about the big days as well, but it's about, as I say, going day in, day out to the races. You're not going to like every day at the races. You're not always going to like the horses you're riding. It's not always going to be great, but actually the best days make up for it. And
it's not always a story, just because you're riding.
Exactly.
It's something you do because it's your job, just like it's anybody else's job. So it's a question of normalising it, I suppose.
Exactly. And as I say, I tried going to internships and finding ways to support my amateur career, but it was never going to happen. And actually, so I realised that for me, the only way I could progress in life in general was to find a career that I enjoyed, and that was racing. And that's just how it turned out for me.
When you were going to these internships, was it just low boredom threshold, or just didn't...
Low boredom threshold, and I just could not get away from racing. And I was sat there and I was trying to manage, and it killed me because I was missing rides. And so I try and manage them so that I would try and take a day off on the best day possible, and that, but I could not. It killed me to miss the rides, and to know that somebody else was getting on that horse and riding it, like whether it was just a 0 to 100 at Exeter or something. I hated the fact that I couldn't go and ride that horse that day, and that for me was that I just couldn't get away from it, and so I had to be completely in it 100%.
It's quite interesting, the insight even from back in the pony racing days of just in preparing yourself mentally as an individual for going racing, for being a jockey. It strikes me when I talk to jockeys in this chair, it can be a very solitary existence at times, and something that you have to sort of have great mental preparation for. Is that something you can identify with?
Definitely. I mean, we spend a lot of time on our own in the cars, and like you ride out in the mornings. You know, a lot of the time you're not always able to obviously you're concentrating on the horse you're riding, but in between that you've got to think about, okay, what time do I need to get to the races? You know, where am I going tomorrow? Do I need to call someone? Do I need to check about where's running what, where, and all of these sorts of things? And you know, your mind's always working a million miles an hour, and you know, sometimes you sort of get back in the evening and, you know, especially in the summer or something, you'll have ridden out 3 lots, gone racing, got back home at 8 o'clock, you'll be looking through the form for the next day, and, you know, there's not much time to switch off, but you definitely, I don't ride half as much as, you know, many of the jockeys in the changing room, and so I just think how difficult it is for them when they've got a full book of rides the next day, and it is difficult balance to sort of strike, but I think, like, you kind of get used to it, and as I say, like, I think for me it's beneficial because I realised that I couldn't be away from it, that actually I've always got that, however difficult it is coming back in the evening and driving back in the car going, God, they all ran really badly today, and you're like, what did I do wrong? And you'll call up whoever you need to, and you'll talk it through with them, and then, like, it's kind of done because I just know that I still wouldn't like to be coming back from an office. So you kind of just have to have that mindset that actually, you know, it is awful, and you can go months without winners, and it does happen, and like that happens to everyone. And you just kind of got to enjoy the good bits and deal with the bad bits.
So you seem to have the right even temperament. Are you easy to live with when you get home after a bad day?
Probably not. No, probably not at all. I probably make it sound very measured, and I come back and I'll try. No, it's not too bad. I think I'm lucky, as we were saying earlier. I've always been chipping away, and you know, I'm old enough now that I've been riding long enough now that I'd like to think that I am getting better at managing it, and it will always be difficult, and there will always be mornings where you come in and, you know, people will know probably just to avoid talking to you, but like I think it'd be the same in any sports person. Like you can't be the best every day, the best person. You just have to try, and as long as you're trying, that's the main thing.
And I suppose now as well, particularly with national hunt jockeys, the longevity of your career, touch wood, is that bit greater because people's fitness has improved and just their general approach to life seems to be better organised than it was, say, 20, 30 years ago. So your career can feasibly last until you're well into your late 30s, early 40s, rather than crashing and burning at 30 odd.
Yeah, I think I don't know how long my career will go on for. I really hope that I will like when I go to the races, winning's just a byproduct of doing everything right. If you go to the races, you know, it's an entertainment sport. You've got to keep the owners happy. You've got to keep the trainers happy. And if you keep the trainers happy, they'll keep the owners happy. You know, so, like, as long as you go out there and you do everything what you're told, you keep everyone happy. If your horses run badly, you've got to make sure that everyone's happy. And actually, like, for me, I just want to go to the races and do the best job I can. And as I say, like, if you're on the best horse in the race and you've done everything right, then the horse will win. And actually, if you can keep those relationships up, like, I hope I can keep those relationships up with the trainers I ride for, are very supportive. And actually, I hope that there's trainers that will support me in the long run. And hopefully that will get me for years to come, you know. And I'd like to think that my career will go on like a while, but obviously, you know, you can never expect anything, can you? You can't take anything for granted, so you've just got to enjoy it while it lasts.
I've asked a lot of jockeys this question in that chair. Will you ride any horse anywhere on any given day, no matter what its overall record might be?
I would. Whether the people around me would let me is a different question. I don't. My agent's always on the phone, and he sort of says to me, you know, he sort of half, you know, he wouldn't let me ride anything, whether or not he's just saying that because he did or didn't get me right. I don't know. I'd like to think that I would give anything a ride that I'm on, especially, you know, I think I really make sure that every time I go to the races, I think a horse has got a chance. And I'd like to think that I would ride anything that I'm told to ride, basically.
If I had a choice between, this is a horrible question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If I had a choice between you and the next rider, and those were my two choices available to me, what would be your key selling points, do you think? Key selling point?
I'd like to, as I say, I'd like to think I'd give everything a ride. You know, however, like, I've grown up on horses that probably haven't got the best of chances. And, like, whether it's 100 to 1 or 2 to 1, I would try my hardest on any horse. But every owner, every trainer has got different opinions on jockeys. Like, you know, I'm sure there are owners out there who probably wouldn't want Dickie on. Like, people are entitled to their opinions, and I suppose you sort of can't really let it bother you if someone doesn't want you on their horse. It's like, so what? Like, you can only do the winning, and if your winning isn't good enough for them, then so be it. And
you've got this attachment. You were saying you've got a great relationship with Zoe Davison, but your attachment to Jamie Snowden's yard is clearly crucial, because this is a yard that's going places. We had Jamie on the show just before Christmas. How important has he been for you?
Jamie has been completely instrumental to my career. I left school at 18 and I started riding out part-time for him then, and 6 years later I'm still there, and he's very much been probably the crucial building of my career. You know, all of the R-rings, the sort of what do I do, I don't know where I am at the moment. You know, he's been there and he's been supportive, and, you know, my best horses have been for Jamie, and, you know, he's taught me pretty much everything I know as far as riding wise, and he's been so supportive over the years, and, you know, it's just great that actually, like, and my career wouldn't be where it is now if it wasn't for the fact that Jamie's horses are just progressing as much as anything else.
And if you've got, it strikes me from what you're saying is you don't really set yourself targets, or do you? I do set myself targets. I like very much when I started at Jamie's full time. I wanted to be a champion amateur jockey, so I reached that target. And then the next year it was, well, keep that and beat last year. I think I had 12 winners first year. I had 16 winners next year. Oh, that was not easy, but you're like, oh, well, that was surprising. And then, you know, I do set myself targets, so obviously always wanting to get better. It's sort of really difficult because as a jockey,
there aren't actually that many targets that you can set yourself that are obvious targets that people would necessarily recognise. Like, the standard targets are, I'd like to win a Grade 1, or I'd like to be champion conditional. Well, realistically, I can't. Like, I love to be champion conditional, don't get me wrong, but against John Joe with his father's backing and everything, it's going to be really tricky. So obviously that's like dream target, but my main target for this season was always to ride out my claim, and I feel like I'm on target for that at the moment, and also just to ride basically an ITV winner as well. I'd love to do that. I haven't done that yet, so that would be nice. Just little targets, like, and I think, you know, as I say, like, being a jockey is really tough and solitary, and actually it's really difficult to find targets that people will kind of respect you but not think you're being too unambitious, because everybody sort of expects everyone to say, I want to be champion jockey when I'm older, I want to do this, I want to be, you know, the next AP, but realistically we can't all be like that. And you look at the interview that Sam Twiston-Davies gave, and he said, I don't want to be champion jockey yet because it might be detrimental to my riding. And actually, you know, I think in racing especially, like, you have to focus on bits for you, and your sort of personal goals are very important, because other people might not recognise them, but they're just as important to you as champion conditional to other people. So
it's knowing who you are, knowing what's realistic, and keeping focused.
Yeah, because there's so much disappointment in the sport. If you don't live up to your own expectations, then you've kind of got no chance, because you're probably, you know, a lot of the time you'll find disappointing parts where you're not quite living up to a lot of people's expectations. So you've got to keep yourself confident as well.
And it seems like you're doing that pretty well.
Trying to.
For the moment, thank you very much. I know you're going to stay with us and look back at yesterday's racing.
Yeah.
Paige was in action at Sandown yesterday. For the moment, Paige Fuller, thank you very much indeed. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.